16 by 9, the bigger picture.
The face of eating disorders is changing. Why it's not just a young woman's disease anymore, and why numbers are on the rise.
I just wanted to be good enough. I didn't want to be that fat idiot anymore.
Up to about 800,000 males in Canada who have struggled with an eating disorder at some point in their life.
Seems like such an easy thing is to go eat dinner, but it's like there's so much terror behind it and you don't even know why.
Do you feel like the medical options available in Canada were adequate?
Absolutely not.
That's all coming up on 16 by 9. Here's Mary Garofalo.
Good evening and welcome to 16 by 9, the bigger picture. Eating disorders used to be seen as a young girl's disease. Now, more and more, boys and men are dying to be thin too. Tonight, Carolyn Jarvis takes us into the dark world of eating disorders, where food is the enemy and every day is a fight to survive.
Look at the two of us, stranger.
There is a haunting parallel in these lyrics.
Let's take a lifetime to say I knew.
Made famous by Karen Carpenter, whose life was cut short by a strangling disease, sung today by a young man who fights the same demons.
Oh, we know. Wanted to be better looking. I just wanted to be good enough. I didn't want to be that fat idiot anymore. I hated myself. I have to say, I really did.
This is not the picture of eating disorders most think of, but in a disease that cripples the mind and starves the body, males are one of the demographics that are getting worse.
I started experimenting with trying to get myself to vomit, till eventually I did it the first time, and then it just never, I guess then I just started purging.
Today is 2 years since Andrew Johnson was released from hospital, and still, recovery is not a word he's ready to say.
The eating disorder is still there. It still taunts me. It's a voice, and it terrorizes me, and it makes me believe the strangest things.
The disease quietly crept into his life when he was 13. An outgoing student with a passion for theater, Andrew was the class clown, but he was also heavier than others, and so he was bullied.
Say that it looks like you're pregnant and you have boobs. I was always the weird kid. I wanted to escape from that image, and I didn't know how. And the only way I thought, oh, I can starve myself, and that's how I can not be so hyper and crazy.
At first, he started skipping meals, throwing out food, exercising obsessively. Then he took a turn for the worse. Andrew started throwing up.
Binging 3 to 5 times a day, afraid to leave my house.
Is it tough to think about that time in your life?
Yeah, it's tough to think about because those whole 2 months I was inside all day, binging, purging. It just got really intense with my family. I remember hanging onto the towel rack. I remember my mom and brother coming from behind me trying to get me to stop binging and purging. And I remember hanging onto that towel rack saying, I want to do this. And my mom's got one leg and my brother's got the other, and they're pulling on me and they're crying. And then I eventually end up ripping off the towel rack.
By that point, Andrew was completely emaciated. He couldn't keep down a glass of water, and doctors finally said his potassium levels were so low he might have a heart attack.
I think that was my rock bottom, and I said I'm gonna get some help. So I ended up getting admitted on the 8th of September. That was the wake-up call. When I'm sitting in a hospital having IV fluid pumped into me because I'm not drinking anything and because I'm not eating anything.
How much did you weigh when you were admitted to hospital?
Just over 100 pounds. Still to this day, my eating disorder says that's not thin enough.
100 pounds was too heavy.
Yes.
What is perhaps more startling than Andrew's struggle is just how common it is and how quietly it is fought.
They might be lawyers, they might be high-profile politicians, they may be athletes in certain cases, and of course they will be your friends and they will be colleagues who you work with.
Paul Gallant is one of a select few in Canada who study men with eating disorders.
Is there an increase in males on the whole?
Over the past 5 to 10 years, yes, definitely an increase. Instead of the 5 to 10% of cases of eating disorders now being in males, or in the past, now it's at about 25 to 33%. If we look at the entire population of Canada, up to about 800,000 males in Canada who have struggled with an eating disorder at some point in their life.
Hundreds of thousands of men in Canada suffering from the disease, and for them it's an illness with a double stigma, and so very few come forward for help. Not only is it thought of as an illness that only affects women, if it does strike a man, for some reason, most assume he must be gay.
Less than 50% of the persons who are male with eating disorders are gay. So most people who have eating disorders and are male are not gay.
For those who are courageous enough to seek treatment, the response is often discouraging. In one focus group Gallant led, 60% of men who went looking for help couldn't find it.
One quote actually that sticks in my mind very strongly is that their family doctor told them, well, men don't have eating disorders, so what are you talking about?
Andrew did seek treatment and escaped the deadly grip the disease had on him.
I mean, my eating disorder was my life. If you were to talk to me at that stage, I was an eating disorder. You weren't talking to Andrew anymore. You were talking head-on with an eating disorder.
Because it took over your life.
And while today Andrew finds reason to smile, he knows this is a disease that never really leaves.
Do you find moments of joy?
Totally. I do. It feels great.
It's cause for celebration.
Mm-hmm. It really is. It's not that I'm, completely 100%, but it's not controlling my life.
Coming up on 16 by 9.
The pressure was so incredible. I saw that she wasn't getting better. I didn't know how to help her. I would have done anything I could have.
That's all coming up. Welcome back to 16 by 9, the bigger picture.
Anorexia is deadly. Statistics show it has the highest mortality rate of any mental illness. But beneath those numbers, story after story of young lives cut short and grieving families who say the system let them down. Here again is Carolyn Jarvis with one family's heartbreaking story.
Through the darkness that encased me,
The frail young woman you're looking at wanted nothing more than to get better.
my life has become clear.
But after years of starvation, Mikhail Kurswell's body was failing her, and her family was powerless to stop it.
The pressure was so incredible. I saw that she wasn't getting better. I didn't know how to help her. I would have done anything I could have.
Mikhail's mom, Kelly, remembers a daughter full of smiles and compassion, a skater, an equestrian, and a budding musician.
Very good, Mikhail.
In her teenage years, Mikhail took up modeling, and that's when the disease truly took hold of her.
She went to Milan, and the fellow looked her up and down, apparently, according to Mikhail, and said, "You're a pig. Go away and lose 20 pounds before you come back and see us."
And how much did she weigh at that time?
110.
From there, the downward spiral was rapid. Mikhail refused to eat.
The first time we found out that she was locking the bathroom and throwing up, when we all realized, because it smelled, we surrounded her in a big circle, the girls and I. And we said, "Mikhail, we love you so much. Is there anything that we can do? Would you please go to a counselor?" And she broke down and wept and wept and wept and said, "I'm just so scared. I'm just so scared of everything."
By 22, Mikhail's anorexia led to pancreatitis. She was admitted to hospital and was on painkillers to get through every day.
Was she getting better while she was in hospital?
Definitely not. She was cementing the habits. She was getting very hardened, very skeptical, very angry.
While hospitalization wasn't working, Both Mikhail and her mum were convinced there was one thing that could save her: an approach to treatment called residential care, where a wide range of specialists treat patients in a home-like setting. But that treatment isn't available in Canada, so Mikhail had to go to the US to get help. It was the breakthrough she had been waiting for.
It was like all of a sudden somebody peeled off this huge, huge, huge armor from this beautiful, frail girl and exposed her. It was like the butterfly came out of the chrysalis. It was absolutely extraordinarily beautiful.
But what happened next, no one saw coming. Mikhail was well enough that she was allowed to return to Canada for a weekend. But when she tried to go back to the US to finish her treatment, she was stopped at customs.
Why wouldn't they let her back in?
Because she didn't have a visa for being in the States for longer than 6 months. We didn't even think of it.
So what happened when she came home?
She relapsed. She went totally into bulimic and anorexic behavior.
Mikhail did make it back to the US 6 weeks later, but by that point, she was too far gone.
They had to send her home. They couldn't help her anymore.
Mikhail's immunity was so low, a simple bug bite swelled into an infection and she was readmitted to a local hospital. This time, she never left.
And I got a call from her dad to say she's collapsed, she's had a heart attack.
Mikhail weighed a mere 76 pounds.
She was just gaunt, just gaunt. You could see every sinew in her body. And I said, you've got to put a tube in, you've got to put a tube in. She just can't last like that. And I was going in to sleep with her. They got her out of intensive care after about 4 days, and I would sleep with her at night till she fell asleep. And I went up to her and her heart wasn't going. She was gone.
Here are the facts. 20% of all anorexics will die. And while cases of men are on the rise, the other disturbing trend is that so are the number of young people. This recent study in the journal Pediatrics showed a 119% increase in the number of kids being hospitalized with eating disorders in the US. In Canada, there are no similar studies, but wait times suggest resources are not meeting the demand. One Canadian hospital we spoke with said its average wait time just for assessment for eating disorders is 3 months for youths. For adults, it's 10 months. Dr. Leora Pinhas leads the eating disorder program at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto.
We're not just seeing 14 to 16-year-old girls here. We see, kids as young as 6 or 7. We see boys. We see kids from all walks of life.
Kids from all walks of life and more of them. Dr. Pinhas blames the way we think and talk about food, at least in part, for that increase.
We're obsessed, I think, with discussing eating and healthy eating and unhealthy eating and couch potatoes and exercise, and that is infiltrating all areas of life.
But Dr. Pinhas says we don't place eating disorders that can spring from that fixation on par with other diseases.
We always say that mental health is kind of the orphan of the healthcare system. We always say here eating disorders is like the orphan of mental health, so it's like a double whammy.
Do you feel like the medical options available in Canada were adequate to treat your daughter's disease?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Why did she have to go to the States? Why did it help so well? Having them in a setting that isn't fearful, like a psych ward, where they don't feel threatened, where they're not badgered, is the way to go. It works.
Works, but wasn't an option in Canada. Kelly, who watched her daughter die from the disease, wants that to change, wants our government to start providing the help that she believes could have saved her daughter.
We need to improve our care for eating disorders because it can be helped.
What do you miss about her most?
Oh, her humor, her compassion, her pride in herself. If only she'd looked after herself. If only. I won't do that. But she was such a caring person.
Still to come on 16 by 9.
Why did you decide to create a foundation?
Because we were mad.
This is going to be like the treatment at the best possible place in the United States.
In Canada.
In Canada.
That's all coming up. Welcome back to 16 by 9, the bigger picture.
Deadly disorders are on the rise and the demand for treatment is growing. Can our healthcare system keep up? Here again is Carolyn Jarvis with a closer look at how we treat eating disorders in this country.
If there is a face of change for treating eating disorders in Canada,
That's the other facility.
you're looking at it. Three mums, Deborah Grimm, Cindy Doby, and Dolores Elliott. Their families were once at the mercy of a disease with few options for help.
Why did you decide to create a foundation?
Because we were mad.
Their stories are disturbingly similar. Teenage daughters, desperately ill, and no one in Canada who could heal them.
Kelsey's body was obviously becoming more and more emaciated. Her kidneys were becoming compromised. Her skeletal structure was such that her bones were rubbing on her back and bruising her physical body.
From, I think, her worst at 5'9", she stood at 85 pounds. And kidneys, you name it, gone.
You know, it's one thing when you have somebody sick and they're getting cared for, but it's another thing when they're sick and they're getting sicker and they're not getting the care they need.
Unfortunately, eating disorders doesn't have a lot of cachet. It has a staggering amount of shame.
What was it like as a mom watching your daughter disappear?
Agony, and disappear is the absolute perfect world.
Weeks and even months of hospitalizations weren't working, so each of these women did the same thing.
We mortgaged.
We remortgaged.
We remortgaged.
They were desperate to save their daughters, and they needed money to do it, to send their daughters to the U.S. for treatment at a residential care facility. It's treating patients outside an institutional setting with therapy tailored to their needs. And study after study is pointing to the effectiveness of this model, something that Cindy, Dolores, and Deborah's daughters experienced firsthand.
Do you credit residential treatment in the U.S. with your daughter's life?
I do.
I do.
Oh, absolutely.
Because of their reputation for success, the number of residential treatment centers in the U.S. has tripled in a decade. In Canada, they don't exist, but that's not to say Canadians don't go. Provincial governments have paid for more than 200 patients to go to these centers over the past 5 years, while many others end up having to pay their own way, like Cindy, Deborah, and Dolores did. The average cost for treatment, $80,000. With their daughters firmly on the path to recovery, these women had a singular goal.
Our goal was to create the first residential center for adolescents in Canada for eating disorders. Residential treatment is it's a standard practice. All across the States is littered with residential centers.
Europe.
It's in Europe, it's in various places of the world, but we have not embraced it.
10 years after they started their quest, this is it. The Woodstone Residential Facility on BC's Galliano Island. It will offer treatment for 17 to 24-year-old men and women, and it opens March 1st.
You can't ignore this. This is an illness, and it devastates families. It has the highest mortality rate of any mental illness. How do you brush that under the carpet and say, just a bunch of skinny, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant girls who don't need help?
The province will pay for 10 of these beds. The Women's Foundation will fund 10 more. And at $400 a day, the cost will be a fraction of the U.S. price. Dr. Laird Birmingham is Woodstone's medical director.
Are you optimistic that it's going to work?
Well, I've been doing it for 30 years gradually, yes. This is going to be like the treatment at the best possible place in the United States.
In Canada.
In Canada.
The best treatment, but only 20 spots. And already there's a waiting list of people across Canada who are desperate for help. People like Devin Newman.
In my eyes, I've always seen myself as fat.
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 Devin's journey has been heartbreaking to watch. A model and makeup artist, she has dreams of traveling abroad. But her reality is one of going in and out of hospitals since she was 13, not treating the disease, just barely keeping her alive.
You go in there, you're sent out to medicine, you're on strict bed rest, you have a tube feed, you're not allowed to use the washroom, you have to have somebody watch you shower, you have a sitter 24/7 because people always tamper with their tubes and their tube feeds. And then you leave and you're like, oh, now what do I do?
Some areas have gotten better. For example, Devin loves going swimming and invited us along. Today, she can do that without obsessing about exercise like she once did. Still, she only weighs 87 pounds and calls that fat.
A lot of people assume eating disorders are like, you can choose, it seems like such an easy thing is to go eat dinner, eat a good lunch or something, but it's like, there's so much terror behind it and you don't even know why.
What drives you?
Well, if you start losing and you're healthier and then you start losing, people tell you you look good and it's like, oh my gosh, good. If I lose more, I'll keep getting those comments and you look better and you look better. Or if you start losing, people are like, are you okay? And then you're like, oh, somebody cares for me. If I lose more people will care for me.
Is an eating disorder a way of calling out for help?
I guess so.
Devin is one of the lucky ones and has been accepted at Woodstone, but she knows she's only one of the many who need help.
I know so many people who would give anything to go here because they have had an eating disorder for years and years and years, and they want to just be outside of their eating disorders for once.
20 beds are a start, but the 3 women behind Woodstone know there's still such a long way to go. Across the country, thousands of other men and women, boys and girls, are struggling against a mental illness that makes food the enemy.
They're still fainting in the middle of the grocery store, or they're dropping.
I know a young woman threw up 21 times a day.
But she wasn't sick enough.
She wasn't sick enough.
A fellow called and said the same thing. I'm vomiting 15 times a day and I can't even get into my community program.
That's shocking.
But that's the truth. Those are the phone calls we receive.
Those desperate phone calls are what drove these women to build this place. It's a small step against a big problem, but it will at least make sure a few more cries for help are heard.
Again, I'll say it saves lives. So why not? If we save a few lives,
that's okay.
That's it. That's all we ever wanted. That's what we wanted to do, is to help people. We took our nightmare to make it into, I guess, a dream.
And that's it for us tonight. If you have a story idea, just call us at 1-877-TELL-169 or visit our website at global16by9.com. I'm Mary Garofalo. Thank you for watching, and from all of us here, good night.
If you've got a story idea for 16 by 9, call our tip line. "16 by 9, the bigger picture." That's a wrap.